What if everything you've been told about high blood pressure is wrong? Here's a shocking statistic that will change how you think about your health forever. Over 116 million Americans have high blood pressure, and 95% of them are focusing on completely the wrong thing. While everyone's obsessing over salt shakers and sodium labels, there's a silent culprit hiding in plain sight that's responsible for more cardiovascular deaths than smoking, obesity, and diabetes combined. And the medical establishment, they're barely talking about it. This isn't about salt. It's not about genetics, and it's definitely not what your doctor warned you about last visit. What I'm about to reveal could literally save your life. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why millions of people are treating their blood pressure completely backwards. But first, I need your help with something. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one health myth you believed for years before discovering the truth? Maybe it was breakfast is the most important meal, or you need 8 glasses of water daily. Share your story, because understanding how health myths spread is exactly what we're diving into today. And if this kind of myth-busting content helps you make better health decisions, hit that subscribe button so we can keep separating fact from fiction together. So, where did this obsession with salt and blood pressure actually come from? The story goes back to 1904, when French doctors noticed that 6 patients with high blood pressure happened to eat a lot of salt. 6 people, that's it. But this tiny observation sparked a century-long crusade against sodium that became one of medicine's most persistent myths. The real momentum came in the 1970s, when researcher Louis Dahl conducted studies on rats, feeding them the human equivalent of 500 grams of salt per day. That's like eating 4 entire cups of salt daily. Unsurprisingly, the rats developed high blood pressure. But here's the kicker. This extreme, unrealistic scenario became the foundation for decades of public health policy. Then the food industry jumped on board, not because they cared about health, but because low sodium became a profitable marketing angle suddenly. Grocery store shelves exploded with expensive heart-healthy alternatives. The American Heart Association endorsed the low-salt approach, government guidelines followed suit, and doctors started prescribing bland, restrictive diets to millions of patients. But here's what's really disturbing. While everyone was distracted by salt, the real culprit was quietly destroying cardiovascular systems worldwide, and it's something most people consume multiple times every single day without even thinking about it. Let's talk about what the science actually says, because the research on salt and blood pressure is far more complex than anyone wants to admit. The Cochrane Review, which is considered the gold standard of medical research, analyzed 185 studies involving over 12,000 participants. Their conclusion was shocking. Reducing salt intake lowered blood pressure by an average of just 1 to 4 millimeters of mercury. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the same effect as taking a deep breath. But here's where it gets interesting. The Pure study, published in The Lancet and involving over 130,000 people across 49 countries, found something that completely contradicts everything we've been told. People consuming less than 3 grams of sodium per day actually had higher rates of heart disease and death compared to those eating moderate amounts. The sweet spot? Around 3 to 5 grams daily, which is exactly what most people naturally consume. Now let's talk about the real hidden cause, chronic inflammation. Dr. Paul Ridker's research at Harvard, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, followed 28,000 people for over 20 years and found that inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein were better predictors of heart attacks than cholesterol or blood pressure readings. Here's the mechanism. Chronic inflammation damages the inner lining of blood vessels, called the endothelium. This damage triggers the body's repair response, causing vessel walls to thicken and become less flexible. The result? Higher blood pressure as the heart works harder to pump blood through these narrowed, stiffened arteries. What causes this inflammation? primarily processed foods loaded with refined sugars, omega-6 vegetable oils, and artificial additives. A study in the Journal of Clinical Investigation showed that just one high-sugar meal can trigger inflammatory responses that last for hours. Meanwhile, the omega-6 oils found in most packaged foods create an inflammatory cascade that can persist for days. Dr. James DiNicolantonio's research revealed something even more shocking. The average person today consumes 20 times more omega-6 oils than their great-grandparents did, directly correlating with the explosion in cardiovascular disease rates since the 1960s. So if salt isn't the real problem, why do some people swear that cutting sodium improved their blood pressure? There are several psychological and physiological factors at play here. First, there's the classic placebo effect. When people believe they're doing something beneficial for their health, they often experience real improvements. Studies show that the placebo effect can lower blood pressure by 5 to 15 millimeters of mercury, which is actually more significant than most salt reduction interventions. Second, when people go on low sodium diets, they usually make other changes simultaneously. They stop eating processed foods, start cooking more at home, increase their vegetable intake, and become more health conscious overall. These other changes are likely responsible for any improvements they experience, but salt gets the credit. Third, there's something called the healthy user bias. People who meticulously track their sodium intake tend to be more health conscious in general. They exercise more, sleep better, manage stress more effectively, and avoid other risk factors. Again, salt reduction gets credited for improvements that are actually caused by these broader lifestyle changes. There's also a temporary water retention effect. When people dramatically cut sodium, they may lose a few pounds of water weight quickly, which can slightly reduce blood pressure in the short term. But this isn't addressing the underlying cardiovascular health issues, it's just masking symptoms. Finally, some people are genuinely salt sensitive, representing about 25% of the population with high blood pressure. For these individuals, moderate sodium reduction can help, but the other 75% are focusing on the wrong target entirely, while the real threat continues damaging their cardiovascular system. Here's what nobody talks about: the potential dangers of extremely low sodium diets, especially for older adults. The Rotterdam study, which followed 2,600 people for 8 years, found that those with the lowest sodium intake had a 56% higher risk of cardiovascular death compared to those with moderate intake. Why? Because sodium is essential for proper blood volume regulation, nerve function, and muscle contractions, including the heart muscle itself. Extremely low sodium can trigger something called the renin-angiotensin system, a hormonal response that actually increases blood pressure and stress on the cardiovascular system. It's like the body's panic response to what it perceives as dehydration or blood volume loss. There's also the insulin resistance connection. Research published in Metabolism Journal showed that low sodium diets can increase insulin resistance by up to 15%, potentially leading to type 2 diabetes, which is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So in trying to prevent one problem, extreme salt restriction might be creating another. For older adults, the risks are even more serious. Low sodium can contribute to falls, confusion, and hospitalization due to electrolyte imbalances. The irony? Many seniors are so focused on avoiding salt that they're actually increasing their overall health risks. Meanwhile, the real inflammatory culprits continue wreaking havoc unchecked. So what should people focus on instead? Let's talk about evidence-based strategies that actually address the root causes of high blood pressure. First, tackle chronic inflammation at its source. This means dramatically reducing or eliminating processed foods, especially those containing high fructose, corn syrup, and industrial seed oils like soybean, corn, and canola oil. These oils are inflammatory powerhouses that most people consume without realizing it. Instead, focus on anti-inflammatory foods. Wild-caught fatty fish like salmon and sardines provide omega-3 fatty acids that actively reduce inflammation. Leafy greens contain nitrates that help blood vessels relax and dilate naturally. Berries are packed with anthocyanins, powerful compounds that protect blood vessel walls from inflammatory damage. Second, prioritize magnesium and potassium, the minerals that actually regulate blood pressure naturally. Most people are severely deficient in both. Magnesium helps blood vessels relax, while potassium counterbalances sodium's effects. Dark leafy greens, avocados, nuts, and seeds are excellent sources. Third, address stress and sleep quality. Chronic stress triggers cortisol release, which directly raises blood pressure and promotes inflammation. Poor sleep disrupts hormonal balance and increases inflammatory markers. These factors often have a bigger impact on blood pressure than dietary sodium ever could. Fourth, consider intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. Research shows that giving the digestive system regular breaks reduces systemic inflammation and can significantly improve blood pressure readings within just a few weeks. Fifth, optimize vitamin D levels. Deficiency in vitamin D, which affects over 40% of adults, is strongly linked to high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. This is especially important for people living in northern climates or those who spend most of their time indoors. Finally, incorporate regular movement, but not necessarily intense exercise. Simple activities like walking, especially after meals, can improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation more effectively than sporadic intense workouts that actually increase stress hormones. The beauty of addressing inflammation instead of obsessing over salt. These changes improve overall health, energy levels, and longevity, not just blood pressure numbers. Here's the bottom line, and if you've been struggling with high blood pressure despite cutting salt, you're not failing, you're just focusing on the wrong target. The solution isn't about restriction and deprivation, it's about abundance of the right foods and lifestyle factors. This doesn't mean you should start dumping salt on everything, but it does mean you can stop living in fear of every milligram of sodium while ignoring the inflammatory foods that are actually damaging your cardiovascular system. The most powerful step you can take starting today: read ingredient labels and avoid anything with high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, or long lists of unpronounceable chemicals. These are the real enemies of healthy blood pressure, not the sea salt on your home-cooked vegetables. Remember, your great-grandparents didn't have an epidemic of high blood pressure, and they weren't afraid of salt. What they didn't have was processed food factories pumping inflammatory compounds into every packaged product. The truth about blood pressure isn't complicated, but it's been deliberately obscured by decades of misdirection and oversimplified advice. While millions of people are stressed about sodium intake, the real culprits are hiding in plain sight in nearly every processed food product. Understanding this difference isn't just about lowering numbers on a blood pressure cuff. It's about reclaiming control over your health and making decisions based on actual science rather than outdated myths. If this video helped you see blood pressure from a completely new perspective, consider sharing it with someone who's been struggling with this issue. And if you're ready to dive deeper into separating health facts from fiction, there are more myth-boosting videos waiting for you right here on the channel. Remember, your health is too important to base on myths, no matter how widely accepted they might be.